As soon as you see this. Wow, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the E-Commerce Expander Secrets. My name's Andy Hooper. I'm your host from Global E-Commerce Experts, and we're here to successfully expand e-commerce sellers into Europe. And today's guest is someone we've been trying to go backwards and forwards to get on the podcast for a while, actually. So I'm amazed and really, really pleased that we've managed to get Michael on. So, hello, Michael. Are you there?
I am there, yes. Hi, Andy.
Fantastic. Hi, how you doing, Michael? Thank you very much for joining us.
Doing well. Thank you for having me.
Fantastic. So we're going to do a little intro to Michael in a moment, and then we're going to get to know Michael a little bit better, a bit about his background, a bit about how he got into e-commerce, what role he's doing now, what the role he does now, the companies with, what that does, and then what he sees as, the vision for e-commerce in the future, which is really, really exciting. So Michael, why don't you give us a little intro to you, if that's okay?
Sure. I mean, I've been involved in actually the supply chain, as you know, Andy, and I've been doing that since 1978, and focusing on China only, which sounds a bit funny because China is a big place, so only is actually a lot of things. Yeah. But yeah, so that's business-wise my background. As far as personal is concerned, I was born and grew up in Belgium, but then I moved to Australia and ended up going to China for the first time in 1975 after I took some university courses in modern and classical Chinese philosophy, history, all that kind of thing. And and as it turned out, all that was before Mao Zedong died in 1976. So a lot of people wondered why I, who has basically a focus on business, am interested in Chinese, and it was just curiosity. There was no obvious purpose. It turned out, if anything, I was a bit lucky that I had chosen that.
Well, actually, I'm gonna. What I'd like to know is a little bit more about that. So you started in Belgium. Where did you go to university?
I went to the Australian National University in Canberra, Australia.
Okay, and is that where you ended up growing? You were born in Belgium, but did you grow up in Australia?
Well, I was born in Belgium. I went to Australia when I was 15. My mother is Australian, and that's sort of the link there.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. So you're in Canberra, easy for me to say. So you're doing your university there. So the Chinese thing then, obviously you've chosen to do that. And as you say, at the time, people were thinking, well, why are you doing that? Now, looking back from now, you're thinking, well, that was an obvious choice. But what led you to go down to that route? Like, what was the decision-making process? Was it you just had an interest in it, so you just followed your interest? Or was it you was thinking, I can see this as an emerging economy, much far greater than it's going to be, and I see this is where I want to be? What was your thought process there?
Well, I'd love to be able to say what you just said, having this great vision. But in fact, when I was at university, I was an 18-year-old young guy. And the reason why I got interested in Chinese was much more basic, because in my first year at university, I had one course missing. I had to fill in this one slot, and I was hesitating between prehistory and modern Chinese. And then all the friends I consulted unanimously told me that modern Chinese was a bad idea. So, of course, I chose that.
You chose it. Yeah, brilliant. Excellent. I love that. So it was more, so you then started, you doing the sort of Chinese, part of your university and stuff. So what sparked the interest? Because something must have sparked an interest from that point on as you started going forwards. Can you remember something that sparked an interest that you thought there's something here that I just really enjoy?
Well, at the beginning, it was intellectual. As I said, I was born in Belgium, and anybody in that part of the world speaks multiple languages. Belgium has, as you know, 2 official national languages, just to make life easy. And you're right next door to a whole bunch of countries that speak different languages. So I spoke a couple of European languages, but they're all, alphabet based. And I was very curious about this Chinese approach to writing. That was my main interest. And the difference isn't just that, China has some 30,000 characters in a dictionary. The difference is that our script, I discovered, is based on the ability to, you need to know the language in order to understand what you're reading. In other words, if you're reading a text in English, you must speak English. Yep. But if you read a text in Chinese, you don't have to speak Mandarin. You could speak French or English, as long as you understand how to interpret these characters. And I found that fascinating. So that was the beginning of my effort. And as I learned more about it, I got more involved in it.
Yeah.
And it had no business context at the time.
And then you said you went to China in 1975. Was that right?
That is correct. Yes.
And what was that? Was that holiday research? Was that what did that look like?
Yes. So it was holiday, but in those days you couldn't get to China. You couldn't really. I mean, for me, it was holiday and research in a way. It was a fascinating opportunity to go there, and the reason why I was able to go, because you couldn't get visas in those days, was that a friend of mine. Very close friend of mine, his father was the ambassador of France in Beijing. So I got that invitation and I was able to go in.
Oh, wow. Okay, fantastic. So in 1975, you've had this amazing trip to China. Well, I'm presuming it was amazing. Trip to China, Beijing. Did you just stay in Beijing or did you go to other areas as well?
Well, I stayed in Beijing. I traveled from the south of China. So I came into Hong Kong, went across the border into Shenzhen, which was this, 2-horse town, tiny little hamlet.
Not like it is now.
Well, now it's humongous. It's ridiculous.
Huge.
But at the time, it was the place where you crossed the border to catch the train into Guangzhou. So I went from there, traveled by train to Guangzhou, spent a night, and then went on the overnight train. I think it was 24-hour train ride from Guangzhou to Beijing. And then I spent a lot of time in Beijing, which was incredible discovery. I mean, these were the days where people, still dressed, the way that you would imagine communist China was dressing. But I also had the opportunity to go to different parts of China, Tianjin and Hebei, and I took a train ride to Siberia, through Mongolia, Manchuria, and so went to the USSR at the time, crossed the border, went there, and it was a fascinating part of the trip.
Oh, fantastic! My that Mongolia bit, my friends did. They went from Russia on the Siberian Express, and then they did their honeymoon in Mongolia doing horseback riding.
Nice.
which sounds amazing. Anyway, okay, so 1975, we've done that. You've come back from China. What does the world look like for you after that?
Well, so a lot of people said to me, what do you think is going to happen? Because you've seen China. And of course, when you see China for yourself, it's very different than what you read about in books, especially in those days.
Totally agree.
And so they asked me what I thought was going to happen. And I said, look, in my view, when I was there, by the way, I went to the funeral of Zhou Enlai, who had passed away just because I was in China for 4 months, and he had passed away when I was there. Yep. So I went to his funeral, I incidentally had a broken leg. I forgot to mention that. So I was on crutches during the whole trip.
Oh,
And
wow. Just to complicate it.
yeah, and but I guess I got a little bit of a political awareness and a feeling about the place as a result of all these, if you want, adventures. And they asked me what did I think was going to happen, and I said, look, when inevitably Mao Zedong is going to die, and when he dies, China's going to tip. It's going to either tip left or right, and if it tips left, then it's going to close up even more, kind of what North Korea is a bit like today.
Yep.
But there's a good chance that it'll tip right, in which case China will open up. And so that was my point of view in 1976.
Well, which is essentially what then happened from then on, pretty much.
Yeah, so Mao died later in 76. And indeed, then you had this whole Gang of Four thing, and then Deng Xiaoping emerged, and suddenly China opened up in an extraordinary way.
It was interesting because didn't they have I can't remember, it's like a 30-year plan or something along those lines of it's like the 30-year plan, and over those 30 years we were going to essentially take bigger market share in everything, and they've sort of done everything they've done, and it's only in the last 10 years everyone's really stood up and taken a huge amount of notice and gone, oh, they're doing too much, and they're like, we've been telling you we're going to do this for 30 years. Is there something like that? Was it 30 years? Why have I got 30 years in my head anyway?
Well, I mean, look, China is ruled by, a political system that provides them with long-term vision, and one of the things that they've got going for them is that, if you want, they typically have 5-year plans, but they have, a 50-year vision. And, and one of the things that China wanted to do is to pull itself by its bootstraps and emerge from the condition that they were in. And, especially Chinese intellectuals, have a strong feeling that they're just regaining their place in history, because China, if you look back in the, 18th century, I think China was the largest economy in the world. And they felt, we should go back there. We should, so you had a bit of that going on.
Yeah. Okay. Fantastic. So you've had this amazing trip. You're sort of intrigued by a little bit more. How did that get you to, what was the sort of process from there to where you are now, the China Performance Group in its early stages when you first started, let's say?
Well, first of all, I had to finish university. I was still in university, and then I went back to China. I didn't go in 77, but I was back in 78, and that's when I set up my company. And but it was very much an adventure, Andy. It was much more sort of go west, young man, and make sure you have a 6-gun with you, than it was an intelligent plan with a predictable outcome. In those days there was no predictable outcome. The Chinese Cultural Revolution was just over in 76, and China was emerging slowly. And 78 was when I moved back, started up my business, and developed. It was a huge struggle at the beginning.
Yeah.
Because there was no predictability, there was no financing, all of the things we're used to. Communication is a key component, Andy, of the supply chain.
Totally.
And communication in those days, from a technology point of view, was ridiculous. You used this thing that you guys probably don't know about, called a telex, to communicate. And then and then things progressed and started to go to, fax, and then eventually this weird thing called email, and suddenly life became much easier. But in the early days, it was very much a shot in the dark. For me, it was an adventure. I'm going to do this. There's a very good chance that I won't survive, but it's worth trying.
I love that. I love that. So I mean, how easy was it to set up a business in China at that point?
Not easy at all. In fact, I set it up in Hong Kong,
Okay.
and
Yep.
and open my office in China. So you could do that as a liaison office, and there were, I mean, you could pretty much count American companies on the fingers of two hands that did that.
Yeah.
Very, very few. No purpose really. Most people, didn't think there was a good reason to do it. Plus, as you know, and many of the people that follow you are startups. The first thing that startups need is money, and so you find investors, banks, lenders, whatever. For me, it was if I went to banks and they said, "You want to do what?"
Yeah.
Forget that. And then the Chinese banks, because I approached them too. I said, "Hey, benefits you. I'm going to be involved in trade." And Chinese banks said, "Nope, we don't lend to foreigners. What are you, crazy? It doesn't work that way."
No.
So it was very much you had to make it happen on your own, and that was a great part of the uncertainty.
So what was the initial business plan then? Or the initial idea? I know you said you're going for a journey and see what happens, but what was the initial sort of, okay, these are the three things or whatever it is, these are what we want to do, and this is what I really want to set up and make happen. What was that original business plan look like?
Well, okay, so at the time I thought, you got to remember in terms of context that Taiwan and South Korea were the places to be for importers, especially American importers. America was a big focus for me because, America had the buying power that neither Europe, strangely enough, nor Australia had. I mean, Europe, yes, but Europe was, as you know, it's all these individual countries, and therefore the purchasing power was limited in that sense. So America was my focus, and Taiwan and South Korea were the competitors, if you want. And I was convinced that China could produce certain products for the Chinese market significantly lower cost than Taiwan and South Korea.
Yeah, which obviously we now know is definitely true.
Yeah, but in those days it was not obvious at all. No. And you had two problems in terms of, first, the Chinese government had decided to open. That was in my favor.
Yeah.
They centralized everything, which in a way in the early days was also a favorable thing. But they had no idea of costs and profitability. So their focus was foreign exchange. They wanted to export in order to get dollars so that they could buy stuff.
Okay, which makes perfect sense. Yeah. Okay. All right. And so you've started this off. Obviously, it's been going very successfully for a significant number of years. Over that period, obviously China has changed massively. Is my guess. Obviously, I hadn't been. The first time I went was 2015, and my recollection, and that's obviously significantly after when you arrived, and we went to visit some factories, and we penciled some factories to go and see in Shenzhen. And I'm thinking, well, that's okay. We'll just go from one to the other to the other. And that all seems like a very good idea when you realize that Shenzhen is about the size of the UK, and it's like going from one side of the UK to the other between factories, which was a slight, and it's probably not quite the size of the UK, but it's probably not far off Wales, definitely. And, over that, when I was there, and I've been back a couple of times since, what I've seen is, things are adapting and changing and building. And, what's been that biggest difference, you think, in that period from sort of then to now?
Well, Andy, the biggest difference was that when I started, you had to convince the factories that they could do it, literally. You'd come up with, we would have fairly basic merchandise, like, for example, rubber boots. And you'd go to a factory that made rubber boots, and you said, look, you can change it, make it for the US market. You just have to change this, change that, make that better, and then you can do it. And the factory said, nah, we don't think we can do it. And you had to convince them.
Yeah.
Now, if you're a buyer and people, Chinese factories know that you're in China, okay, put aside COVID, they would bang on your door and try to, make you work with them. So that the attitude of the vendor, if you want, was very different. And that was partially because in 78, China was still pretty much a communist country, and the vendors were basically state-owned enterprise. The factory manager didn't have a stake in what you were doing. He didn't care. And of course, 90+% of, close to 99% of factories that sell, including, I'm sure, the ones you visited in Shenzhen, are owned by private people. And of course, private people are motivated. They want to sell. They want you to be, as a buyer, they want you to be happy, and they want you to come back.
Yeah, totally.
But not in those days.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So talk me through over the years, obviously I guess that you've sort of tweaked the things as you've gone, but what do you guys focus on solely now? What's your sole focus as the China Performance Group? What is it that you perform and how you support people?
Well, that's so there was a transformation. At the beginning, the only way we could make ends meet is to really be a trading company. And that's because China had no credibility. So we would say, look, we can get you these boots for 20% less than you're currently buying them. And people say, tell me another one, and we say, fine, do a contract and we'll deliver. And so we would make, as a trading company, we would make a margin on the real cost and what we sold the boots for. And in that sense, we were obligated to deliver. And if there was a problem with the product, we owned it. And so that was the initial business model. But then China started to rapidly become flavor of the month for importers. A lot of importers became aware in the late 70s of China's opportunities. And I'm talking about people that are very savvy importers, not the run-of-the-mill companies. And they came into China and started to erode, if you want, those margins that I referred to.
Yes.
So we said to our clients, tell you what, we're not going to sell to you anymore. What we're going to do is we're going to help you buy. And that's what China Performance Group became. It's a service enterprise that helps our clients buy better in China. And the reason why this makes a lot of sense, Andy, is because all of these companies, they needed feet on the ground. They needed eyes in the factory. They wanted to control the process of sourcing, of supply chain, if you want. And when we were a trading company selling a product, you're kind of limited to that product. You can't very well say to a buyer, I'm selling you rubber boots, and tomorrow I'm going to sell you toothbrushes because I'm an expert in that too. We are very much product agnostics today, in the sense that it doesn't matter what product goes through the China Performance Group system. Our expertise is to help our clients buy it and make sure it gets there in terms of quality assurance and on-time delivery. So the whole process is what we developed a very early expertise on, and we fine-tuned over the years.
Because I think that's really key, isn't it? That there's lots of people that are sourcing in China. They never even go to Alibaba, they source some stuff. But that's if you want a product that you want to dip your toe in and try the market, you might be lucky and that might be okay. But the reality is that as a brand and a brand owner, you need to have a relationship with the factory that's going to give you that ability to the QC part is absolutely critical. And have the factory know that you're taking this seriously. The factory now want to know that you're a serious buyer. They don't want the small buyers, they want the serious buyers. And I think that makes a lot of difference. I think a lot of when we talk to sellers, the key thing from them is about you're working with the factory, getting the factory to understand what they're doing, getting them to buy into what they're doing. But I think that boots on the ground thing is absolutely critical. And people want to know that, their stock, their inheritance, their children's inheritance is essentially being looked after, because, all too often we get stock arrive here and, they come into our warehouse and there's a unit missing or it don't quite look right. And you can tell the difference between a smaller seller and an established brand, because the established brand typically never has any issues whatsoever. And if they do, it's a very, very random one that is for whatever reason. On the other hand, if you've got a much smaller seller who's bought on Alibaba and chancing their luck, they come through and they're just all over the place. What's your experience with those sort of things? Have you seen similar?
Well, yeah, very much so. I think you put your finger on it, Andy. A small buyer has a much bigger challenge in getting what they want, getting respect, if you want, from Chinese factories, for the simple reason that they're small. It's, if your name is Walmart and you walk in there, they're going to give you the best price, the best service, the best red carpet they can find, and make sure that you are going to actually place your orders in that particular factory. But not everybody's name is Walmart. And the problem, or the challenge, if you want, for the small buyer is a competitive one. They need to, they have an e-commerce platform. They promise to sell this product. They need to have inventory. That inventory has to conform in terms of quality and performance with what they promise. And one of the key elements is price, because if you make a very successful item and suddenly sales are going through the roof, you can be sure that somebody's going to want to copy you and make it cheaper in China. If you can't do it yourself, they're going to outflank you, as it were. So it's very important. You're right that some people can go in China, they can be lucky, they can place an order, they can get the merchandise on time. But a lot of it has to do with repetitivity. How can you repeat that? How can you scale that? And if you start to move into scale, you can't leave the issue of quality assurance and on-time delivery to chance. You've got to control it. Yep. And that's when you need to have, again, feet on the ground, and you need to have savvy people looking after the process.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay. And so supply chain at the moment is probably one of the most difficult things that's happening, with, cruise ships, container ships, getting stock out of China, it's basically since COVID, January last year, let's say, getting stock into the States or Europe has been painful. Whether it's container ships stuck across the Suez Canal, whether it's COVID, whether it's not enough containers in the right place, whatever it is, there all seems to be a massive issue right now. Where you crystal ball next 3 to 6 months, from a China-based perspective, how do you see that playing out? Do you see that that's going to ease and it's going to be easier? And I'm hearing that there's electric outages in parts of China right now, and actually displays that just adds to the issues. And I'm hearing that third hand, so I don't know whether that's the case or not. But there's all of these things. What's your crystal ball for that right now?
Well, first of all, what you said is all correct. And of course, the supply chain, that concept, supply chain, has suddenly become a big kind of newsworthy item in the media in the last couple of months, whereas before, nobody really knew what that meant. But and you are correct that the cost of containers has gone through the roof. It's ridiculous right now.
Yeah.
And so if you look at the supply chain from China's point of view, you need to be mindful of the dynamics that drive this environment. And the dynamics in China are driven partially by what I call a COVID effect. So, which is, I think, what drives the rest of the world, all the problems that we have, including, for example, in the UK with truck drivers.
Yep.
All that's linked to this COVID effect, and so is the lack of supply of containers. But that's not going to last. It may take. I don't know if the price of containers is going to drop back to its pre-COVID level. That's for sure. How long will it take? Difficult to tell. I don't think it'll be 6 months. I think it might be more in the 1 year horizon. Now, the second element, Andy, is competitiveness. You know, a lot of people are saying, what the heck, you know, especially in America, because you have this tariff situation going.
Yeah.
You know, I'm going to move my supply chain elsewhere. But the problem with elsewhere is that they're challenged too. You know, Vietnam in the south has all sorts of issues in terms of delivery, also related to COVID right now. And the other thing that a lot of people are not very much aware is that China kept a lid on labor prices for decades because of their seemingly inexhaustible supply of manpower. And that's come to an end. You know, cost of labor in China is going up. But the rest of Southeast Asia kind of heaved a sigh of relief when this happened, because if they wanted to be competitive, they had to keep their labor costs down. And so now the whole world, if you want, is becoming more expensive in that sense, or they have to be more productive. In other words, they should make more stuff with the same amount of labor, which China is starting to become much better at. Yeah. But so long term, crystal balls are difficult to find these days. But long term, I think within 6 months, China is going to continue to deliver as the factory of the world type thing, and they'll get back into their stride within, I would say, 12 months in terms of cost of shipping and containers.
Yeah, that's interesting, because that whole piece is probably the biggest headache a lot of our sellers are facing right now. That whole, as you say, containers are through the roof. I mean, it's bonkers, absolute crazy. But it is what it is. I mean, there's nothing you can do about it. So it's a case of deal with it and move on. Unfortunately, I know that's pretty tough for some people to hear. But that's
plus, I mean, you also have problems like, even if you get good shipments that leave on time, they arrive in places like Oakland, and they can't get unloaded. They get stuck there for weeks, and people can't. Yeah. People are not used to that, Andy. As you know, we're used to just in time and that kind of mentality, but people had to adjust a bit. And I think
there's a huge amount of that adjusting. I think that's really, really key. So, okay. All right. Look, so we're coming up sort of near the end, I guess, but I think from if you was to talk to your perfect, client, what would they look like and what would they get?
Well, we don't have per se a perfect client. A client for us is somebody who needs support in the China supply chain. In other words, somebody who buys something of value, like you said, and I liked your illustration. They put their inheritance into that, because when you buy merchandise, you take a risk. You got to sell it in order to make money, and a lot of companies focus a huge amount of their energy on the selling side of the supply chain, which I think is a role that your company does very well. I mean, especially for US companies, the notion that you can double your business by going to Europe is fantastic. You keep the same concept, the same product, and suddenly you've got this access to this new market. It's a brilliant idea, but you got to get the product, and you got to get that product seamlessly, ideally without any recalls, without any quality problems, and ideally on time. And also in the right quantity, which is linked to time, because from order placement to delivery, that's a concern as well. So all that has to do with controlling the supply chain. And if you've got people that help you, people with expertise that make that happen, suddenly that concern goes away. And what we provide, Andy, is that missing element that a lot of companies have. They're well equipped in terms of sales. They've got a very good marketing department. They've got good product development, but supply chain management, it's the necessary evil. The red-headed stepchild. You don't want to deal with it, but you need to deal with it, and we become that for a lot of our clients.
So, and whereabouts are you based, Michael?
We're based in New Jersey, but our biggest office is in Beijing.
Okay, fantastic. And when was the last time you went?
December 2019.
Yeah.
I used to go there, Andy, 13 times a year on average.
Yeah.
And suddenly I'm on holiday.
Yeah. It's bonkers, isn't it?
Well, it's times are changing, as Bob Dylan might tell us.
Do you think you'll get back out there soon? What's the state of play, do you think, there?
Well, it's the thing is, it's very iffy, and it's kind of interesting. It's very iffy because my main office is in Beijing, and Beijing is the most protected city in China in terms of COVID. I don't know if you noticed, but when the U.S. Big delegations visited China recently, they didn't go to Beijing. They met in Tianjin because they tried to protect the capital from any COVID interference. But I have a very good and strong team in Beijing, luckily, and they frankly don't need me to run things there. We have developed, obviously an interactive process through, Zoom, that type of meeting, where we keep our organization together from a management point of view. But they don't need me there, and I participate in some important meetings also via Zoom, and I find it very comfortable. Yep. Instead of spending 13 and a half hours on an airplane to go there,
yes,
suddenly life is easy. So when can I get back? I don't know. A thing to watch, Andy, would be the Olympic Games in February. Think about it. It's in Beijing, and it's not going to be 3 guys coming in. It's going to be tens of thousands of people coming in. It's going to be interesting to see how they deal with that. And if they deal with it successfully, I think China is going to open up. Right now, a lot of people don't want to go, like me, because you don't want to be stuck in a hotel for 2 weeks and that type of thing.
It's just not feasible, is it? I mean, I totally understand why they're doing it, but it's just not feasible for the average. 2 weeks in a hotel. I mean, I can't spend a day in a hotel, let alone 2 weeks.
Exactly. Time is money, and none, especially executives, the kind of people that go to China, they do not have the time.
No, and quite often, I mean, I've been in China for 24 hours and flown back. I'll spend more time on the plane than I have on the ground. That's just how it is. But you've got to adapt, and it's just not possible sometimes. So, okay, fantastic.
And I've done exactly that as well. I spent literally more time in the air than on the ground in China. And one of the things we do, Andy, we're dealing with, you're dealing with business owners who want to see the factories. They want to see what, again, they put their money into it. And one of the things we offer them is, look, you normally plan 7 days. We can get you the same result in 3 days or in 4 days. And that's because we set it up for you. We speak Chinese, we handle it, and we follow through after you're gone. And those people love that. They save 3 days. It's great. And now you tell them you're going to spend 2 weeks in a hotel. I don't think so.
And I think that makes a massive difference. That ability to be able to get into China, have a whole load of things already booked, organized, structured. It just makes sense. You're getting in a Didi and sort of sharing because I've done it. You're getting in a Didi and saying a taxi for those. Yeah. And you're pointing and sort of saying, I'm going to go to here. And you get dropped in this random place and you have no idea if you're even in the right vicinity. And I love that. But I love that adventure, like what you were saying, Michael. I just went to China for an adventure. I mean, that's all me. But for a lot of people, that's just not an acceptable way of doing business, or starting or doing anything. But anyway, okay, look, we have gone way over time. It's been super interesting. I could go on and on and on, ask a whole load more questions. Michael, if people want to get in contact with you, they're interested in sourcing in China, they need some support in China, they need that support and help, which you're perfectly placed to support them with that supply chain piece in China. How do they get in contact with you guys?
Well, I guess the best way is to get on our website, which will guide you, potentially interested parties. The website, I think, is listed on your. Is it listed?
It will be. It will certainly be in all the comms that goes out. Certainly, if you're looking at this wherever you are, it will be below. It'll be a link in there. Whether it's on Facebook or whether it's on the podcast, it'll be in the description below. So you will be able to find it. But if you Google China Performance Group,
you should be able to find us with that as well. Yeah, I hope. Otherwise, I'm going to have something to say to Google.
I've just done it just to make sure. But yes, that's exactly. I don't know whether it's remembered my cookies or not. But in essence, if you Google China Performance Group, you're going to be having it. It's perfect.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay,
I think so.
fantastic.
Andy,
Michael, it's been amazing having you on. It's been great to hear a little bit about your story and about how you got involved and how you got to where you are today. Thank you for your time. Any last messages for anyone that might be listening to sort of warm them to you in any way?
No, I just wanted to thank you. I find it very interesting to talk with you. I love what you guys do, and I wish you and all your clients very well. If they need anything, they know where to find us. But in the meantime, I wish you great continuing success, Andy.
Fantastic, and us to you guys as well. I think that's amazing. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen. That has been another exciting e-commerce expander secrets podcast. Whilst it's not European based, it's about getting stock to Europe from China and about sourcing. Absolutely crucial for anyone expanding. Being able to get stock where they need it, when they need it, is absolutely critical. So thank you very much. This was Andy from Global E-Commerce Experts, here to successfully expand e-commerce brands into Europe. Thanks for your time. Take care, and we'll see you on the next episode. Thanks, Michael. Have a great day.
Thanks,
Cheers.
Andy.
Bye.